Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Uxtsuki. So in this video we are gonna talk a bit more about the coloring process. Not exactly how to pick colors and actually the steps or the sequence you take to color, to paint something actually might affect how this subject is perceived. So I made this silhouette of something that looks like a tree. I think it is kind of readable, so that's why I'm satisfied with it. And I made 4 copies of this. As I said, there is a lot of rules a color might assume in the light and dark context, right? So actually, this process might be innumerous. Rather than I like approach every single one, I will base on what I already show. 4 process you might take into color and to painting in color these things out. What most affect this is the order you will assume in order to paint the whole thing. Right? I will base this video in the 4 light rows, but as I said, since the light might assume the 7 and actually is the one that I usually use most, this would be a little longer. So let's go. So this might be a trip. What is the first and the most common, the default path of coloring something? Is where you set, you paint the mid tone or the flat color, the local color, the half tone, the base color, and etc. Then you light, then you define the shadow, and then you add the highlight by default. So I will pick this color right here as my mid-tone, for example, maybe a little bit more like this. So this is my mid-tone. So now I will just assume a light is coming like from here. So I will assume that this would jump something like to this. So I won't try to add too much detail, but I think the general idea is already being transmitted. The light is already being set, so I will add the shadow in this case. We'll try to spend this less time into coloring, but this is, I think I will just try to transmit the whole idea of this, right? Okay, last but not least, the highlights. So let me. So, okay, this is pretty balanced, right? I think not a single soul that hates this type of workflow, right, into painting. So, actually, this is pretty okay. And then we have the second order that actually is from the brightest to the darkest. So we start with the highlights, then we go to the lights, then the midtones, and then the shadow. And what effect actually this kind of gives is a bit more like divine, celestial, heavenly. So actually this is pretty good, for example, to paint angels, halos, anything that is kind of divine or whimsical, mystical, and etc. So actually this is pretty good for example, visual effects, because usually when you start, I'm kinda exaggerating, but it's just because this actually is what happens, alright? When you are using the highlight as your first color, you will kinda perceive, you will add more areas of contact of this highlight, exactly because you are not sure where yet about the whole shape of your subject. So actually it might touch part that is not in the structure correctly, but actually this serves the purpose. So you end up like complement the other part based on what you painted or not. So actually I think this is not bad. As I said, these have a purpose to paint divine and mystical and special effect. So okay, I would need like to break more this cluster in here to make this more believable that actually this is a tree. But as you can see, these have way more light areas, and not only this, where lights in the last one touch it, this kind of embrace even more, giving a whole different feeling of this tree. So it's not exactly this tree is divine because actually I would need a bit more of details to sell this idea. But actually this is already a different tree as you might feel, right? All right, I think this is pretty good already. So as I said, remember, so this is a more balanced one, and this is where the special effects, the divines, the mystical, the whimsical, the magic, and etc. usually starts from. Not every single one of them, because people might sell the idea this is a divine tree as well in a different order, but actually they might apply different artifacts rather than the painting itself, for example. And if they start by the highlights, maybe they don't even need these artifacts. So, for example, maybe so yeah, divine wings. Okay, now the third one is the one that I usually goes with, alright? That is the opposite. So I go from the darkest to the lightest color. And what effect this sell? Actually, because usually in the shadow you will lack a lot of details because since there is no reflection, there is no light hitting it, so you are less sure what details, what clusters, what material, and etc. is in the shadow, is in the dark. But starting with your darkest shadow kind of makes you detail even more the shadows. So you will add naturally add more details to the shadows, and actually your highlights may be very poor compared to the shadows, but at least selling even more the idea what this subject is about, because this does not depend only upon the lights, for example. So, for example, I will do this. P.S. As I said, I'm kinda not following exactly what I did. I'm kinda following, but not that too faithfully to exactly what I did in the previous one, exactly to simulate the process, right? Because probably I wouldn't know that this part is light heat or this or this. I'm just trying to simulate where what I would do if I was really going with this process without knowing the general shape of the tree I already was following out there. Right here, the previous one, alright? So it's not like I'm pretending that I don't know where I would put certain things. I'm just trying to simulate the steps I would follow. So yes, I think this is totally something that I would end up with. So as you can see, like there are more parts separated and kind of detached compared, for example, to this one that is the whole simply plain shadow. You hear plain shadow as well. So I would kind of detail this even more. Probably if I would follow this the whole idea. I forgot I forgot to highlight these parts with this. But yes, it's something that is natural. My shadow part is actually pretty strong, but the light part is kind of, weak. Let me put it this way. Totally opposite of this. The light is very expressive, but the shadow is like, very bland. So this is the point. Last is the one that people like praise. That is, you start with a midtone, the same thing of this, and actually it's pretty similar. The difference is instead of just shadow everything, you will just shadow just a bit, for example, and then you will light, and then you will shade, then you will light again. This is basically a very balanced process. Obviously, it's not exactly you will shade and light parts that is like close to each other, but this is where you will usually tend to do. and this will result in a very balanced art. And then you might go for the highlight red if everything is pretty balanced compared to the others. You do not have, for example, you are not biased and you have something pretty strong, either like pretty light. But obviously, these also have a downside. Usually, it's everything is too like shaded, lighted, and etc. Usually, your focal points, your point of interest, and etc. will need to be balanced to be adjusted later because everything will be like in the same level of detail. Everything will look like important, right? So, and how you balance this later. Removing lights where it does not need, adding shadows where it kind of feels it is needed. To be pretty honest, this might be the most balanced one, but I just like because there is no strong point to your pixel art, you know? There is no like, oh, the shadows are cool, or oh, the lights are cool. No, in this part, it's kind of everything is in the same level, so nothing pop out. This might not be that much bad in your opinion, and that's okay, but I'm just being very honest with you. I just like how this usually goes end up. Another reason I dislike this it's because you do a lot of micro decisions like do I have put here or here in this pixel in that piece pixel and this actually might be a little bit exhausting for the people have to decide like for each pixel if you're gonna place something that here or not, you know. So I, to be honest, I don't like this that much because this is a bit exhausting. But this just might be the of usage, you know. I don't know. Just I will just stop right here. As you can see, there are a lot of balance between the shadow and the light parts, but usually nothing is like the strong point of this technique. You actually will need to add individually. Alright, so later in the polish phase, for example, actually this is pretty good to be honest. This one probably I would add more interference of the light and the midtone. In this shadow probably I will need to add more texture, more part with the light because for now there is a lot of midtone in here and this one that is very balanced there is nothing that is kind of strong so I will need to polish these into what will be my focal point, what will be more light, where the light will hit harder, where the light will hit harder, lighter, and etc. Right? So basically, this was the whole process. As I said, it is a good idea to go with the mid. If you go for the divine, magical, and etc., the highlights to the darkest. If you want to make a more not exactly serious, but more like with their shadow, have details as well, and in here, if you just want to have everything that is balanced, and later you want to decide what is the thing that is more that matters most, right? So thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.